Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. Time for another show, no matter what we try to do about it. And, there's some interesting stuff that might have happened. I don't know if you guys read the news or anything, but LOL for TFG, I guess, and probably most of you did all your LOLing about that yesterday. And as it news broke in the afternoon that I guess it took the jury in the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit against TFG. I don't know. I guess it must have taken him like 15 minutes to figure out what was going on and find him liable for slander and for, I didn't take a good close look at the way the verdict came out, but I guess they were in a position, not, of course, it wasn't a criminal trial, to hold him or to find him guilty of the rape with which E. Jean Carroll accused him, or of which she accused him. But they did, regardless, find him, one, liable for the defamation for which she sued him for lying about the whole thing and saying, doing the whole not my type thing, but also held him civilly liable for the tort of sexual battery, as I understand it, too. I'll have to take a look back. The big news was the outcome that he didn't want is the outcome that he got because he was guilty of the thing that he said he didn't do, but we could only hold him liable and not find him guilty. But of course, Trump remains in court in a million different settings as well. I had other setbacks in court in the other cases, and there's more to come. But anyway, basically the outcome that everybody expected to be the case because Trump is a filthy dog and a sexual predator. Everybody who was charged with the task of sitting down and considering whether or not he really was someone that people should point at and say, with some authority, that right there is, yes, a sexual predator. A jury has sat down and considered this. And, that shouldn't take very long. And it didn't. The Proud Boys, guys, they deliberated for several days. With this one, not so much. And before you even got all your laughs out about Republican misfortunes from that situation, the party found itself back in court or in a courtroom setting for the charging of George Santos. So, that was kind of cool and fun, too. It was a big day in and around the courtrooms. George Santos charged by the Justice Department in federal criminal charges. We got a couple of articles that we can go over. We'll discuss that. I'm sure Greg wants to talk a little bit about that. And, of course, my week coming to an end today, probably. I mean, not like completely and forever. I'm doing other things. That's the situation. And, of course, graduation coming, and I have to make my way down there. And tomorrow, it's looking like I've started to try and record some material for Thursday and Friday. I guess there's some outside possibility that maybe I might be able to sneak in like 1 hour tomorrow, but I'm not positive, and I'm not sure what Greg's schedule is. He's ready. I mean, he's always got stuff and ready to go. I don't know if it's a smart thing for me, though, to spend 9 to 10 on the air as opposed to recording stuff. But I guess we'll have to see what the volume of news is today. The last time I took a couple of days off, they indicted Trump. And, maybe that's a good thing, and maybe I should take 2 days away from the live show, and who knows what'll happen. He could be indicted again and again, or something else could come up. I don't know. But there's lots to catch up on, of course. And lots that we've been saving and lots that I can put in pre-recorded episodes for Thursday and Friday. I have 2 contributions, and I think this was the reason we got to, from Rosalind McGregor, so I can space those out a little bit. And if I do a Thursday, then I have to do 2 Rosalind segments on Friday. And that, I mean, it's okay with me if it's okay with her. But, the two, I think, was supposed to space these things out. So we'll see how it goes. Let's see how this one goes right here, right now. Greg's here, ready to go. Good morning. How are you? Not
Good
indicted,
morning.
not
I think,
found liable or anything.
You should wear your lucky T-shirt and maybe Trump will be indicted again.
Yeah, if I have one.
You should watch it every once in a while, but maybe the Yankees will win and Trump will be indicted.
Right.
So I think you should take tomorrow off. It's not that I wouldn't be here. If you're on from 9 to 10, I would be here. But
it just feels like the sort of thing that my
don't push
family
it.
would
I mean,
be.
get other stuff
yeah,
done.
Right. I mean, I think that's basically.
Don't have a heart attack at age 37 because you did stuff like
too
this.
late for that. But doesn't mean I can't have one tomorrow. I'd have to be all packed up and ready to go and yada yada. But and I really should be anyway. But I have a feeling I won't be.
Yeah. So take that hour for the I forgot this stuff.
Yeah. Well, unless he's indicted on something else, in which case then we can come on for half an hour and say, goodbye.
So the title of my pundit roundup today was abbreviated pundit roundup. Donald Trump is a sexual abuser proven by a jury trial.
Yeah, look at that.
And he also lies.
Right. Well, people found that to be true, that he lies.
So the weird thing is, I mean, there's a lot of weird things about this trial.
President.
The fact that, it happened at all is amazing because it took E. Jean Carroll stepping forward to do this, and the whole story about how she found the wherewithal.
Yes. Well, we made a deal to put her on the $1 trillion coin.
She didn't find the courage because she was always a courageous woman, but she found the wherewithal to do it because the Me Too movement encouraged her to say, you know what, you don't have to be silent about this stuff.
Yes.
So she comes out.
Congratulations
she tells
to everyone
her
who
story.
participated.
The jury believes just about every word of it.
Of course.
And
it's true.
The usual rule of thumb, I think it was Glenn Kirshner who said this, one of the TV lawyers, but somebody said basically the rule of thumb is for every week of presentation to the jury, they take a day to decide.
Okay.
So if you're having a 6-week trial, 6 days of deliberation.
Yeah, and most trials present for like 2 days.
In this case.
Yeah.
It was just so clear that they decided right away. And what was fascinating about it is who the jury was.
Who they was, Greg.
Who they was. There was all sort of things, and part of the pre-trial thing is the prosecutor and the defense lawyer got to question them about what sort of media they watch. So there were a lot of CNN watchers. There were a couple of people who watch everything. And nobody said, I only watch MSNBC. But one person said, I get my news from Tim Pool podcasts.
Oh, what? Okay.
Right. Tim Pool is a right-wing insurrectionist leaning provocateur.
Yeah, because that's what
you may not have heard of him, but
at.
he's the guy who had Kanye West on apologizing about being anti-Semitic and then sort of walked off the set. Kanye West did because Tim Pool said, well, how anti-Semitic are you really? I mean, something along those. Just to give you an idea of who the jury was.
Huh.
And they still unanimously found that Trump was guilty or liable, I should say, as you point out, within hours.
Well, because it was so plain and obvious.
It was. Now,
that's great.
The other thing that they decided, which people were focusing on for the first 5 minutes until the rest of the impact set in.
No, I think I only did.
They didn't find him liable for rape, but they found him liable for sexual battery.
Yes, that was an odd.
And presumably because they couldn't be convinced that there was proof of penetration.
Yeah.
But, the rest was pretty clear. I mean, they believe her.
Yeah.
But
I guess when you come right down to it,
about whether or not you prove that part of it, but the rest of it, it's pretty bad enough. And and so she got $2 million, I think, for the sexual battery part, and then like 2.7 million for the defamation and you ruined my reputation part.
Yeah,
total $5 million.
Okay, I mean that's a nice start.
Which was amazing. It's a lot of money. It got his attention.
He might not have
of course, the New York Times coverage of it focused on the fact that Trump was angry about the result.
Yeah, well, he was.
Yeah, but
they're right.
That's not really the lead. as they like to say in the business.
I guess.
I mean, who cares? What do you think?
Yeah.
You didn't have to be a New York Times reporter to know he'd not be
well,
happy
that's
with
true.
yourself.
I did want to see his anger a little bit, though.
Well,
but I could see it elsewhere.
So the question on the table when that happened is, all right, as it turns out, timing is everything. CNN must be thrilled because they have a town meeting tonight, and
That's
he's
ridiculous.
on it. And so eyeballs, so they must be thrilled.
I guess so. I mean, really, they should be canceling because this is what you find out when, oh my God, the star of our show is a sexual predator. We should not be on tonight.
You know, the questions that flow from that is, okay, so what kind of deal did CNN make in order to get Trump to agree to do this?
Yeah.
Like, did they promise not to ask about this? What's going on? Oh, no,
Probably.
we never did anything like that. And the problem, of course, is nobody trusts CNN anymore.
Yeah. Which, by the way, when you were saying, they asked the jury about where they get their news, and they all said, or a lot of them said they were CNN watchers. Ordinarily, Trump would then say, see, these people should be dismissed from the jury pool because they're biased because
Not
CNN.
lately.
But it's hard for him to argue that when he's got a town hall scheduled with them the day after the trial ends.
Not only that, and Laszloff and the other people running the place basically said, we want CNN to be more Republican-friendly.
Yeah, that would be more difficult to
deal with. It's hard for him to blow CNN off like that.
Yep. I mean, not that he won't do it. There was that discussion, for instance, over the weekend of the judge giving him extra time to show up to refute the charges as he said he was going to do when he was in Ireland. And the thinking was, well, because he gave him this extra time, now Trump can't attack him as being unfair. But Trump can do any crazy thing. He can say anything he wants. Of course he could,
but I think that was setting up for appeal because they know he's going to appeal it.
Yeah, of course. So CNN will say, well,
he still did these things, and so because it was a civil trial, you have to say he's liable for all these things because he did them.
Yes, if you care about that, or if you just feel like it and you want to say he's a monstrous rapist, you can probably get away with doing it without having too much.
Well, there's 26 people that have filed. Sexual misconduct.
Of various types.
Of various and sundry kinds.
Yes.
So,
full menu.
I mean, he's a serial, whatever it is he does.
Yeah, so there you go.
Plus, he said so on Access Hollywood, which was his confession tape.
Right, and naturally. All that stuff did come back to haunt him. That's what made it so easy for them to decide so quickly. Every time he's spoken about it, on the record, and they videotaped it, his deposition was devastating.
But we'll get to that,
for himself.
When it comes to what people will do about it. The fact of the matter is it's not a hard thing to prove because everybody knows this. Now, yes, there's a certain segment of the Republican population that doesn't care, and that's really the point. It's not like they don't know.
Right.
There's no point arguing the facts with them. They just don't care. It's now to the point where they actually come out and say, well, I don't care. And we'll get to that a little bit, but I still want to hone in a little bit on the observations about the jury and the verdict.
Yeah.
Lisa Rubin, Law of Ruby on Twitter, a very good legal analyst for MSNBC, said, I want to confess something. I was concerned this jury would hang, and in part because of the limited amount we knew about some jurors, which is no reflection on the case. It starts with the reporting by Jose Pagliari, who heard during the questioning of prospective jurors that one of them listens to a lot of Tim Pool. Because Judge Kaplan didn't use a juror questionnaire and instead examined them orally and in rapid succession, the lawyers had to rely on their own notes and the transcript to process what these prospective jurors said. It says Tim Pool became Temple. I listened to a lot of Temple.
Hey,
and
all right.
as a result of speed, bad transcription, poor listening skills, or all of the above, the Tim Pool fan stayed.
That's
But it turns
interesting,
out the
but I
jury
guess it doesn't
listened
matter.
to Joe Tacopina and that his own advice might have backfired on him. He told the jury, people have very strong feelings about Donald Trump, and however you feel about it is okay, but there's a time and a secret place to do that. It's called a ballot box during an election, not here. Because to do so in a court of law would make no better than those who would seek to bend the rule of law for their own personal agendas. So one lesson from today is, as Mary McCord reminded me earlier, they were on MSNBC together on Nicole Wallace's show, that jurors take their jobs incredibly seriously. And they do. We've seen the seriousness of this. the detail that the Tarrio jury in the Proud Boys was asking for detail and correcting the record that the court gave them. If they found typos, they would send it back and say, correct this. And love Trump or loathe him, it appears this jury checked their political affiliations and feelings at the courtroom door. Juror number 77 by design, I don't know your name, and I also know that Judge Kaplan advised you to maintain your anonymity as long as possible.
Yes.
But if you want to talk about your own thoughts, just give me.
Yeah, well...
So I just think that was fascinating.
It was.
Now, let me put it together with these couple of pieces. This one is from The Atlantic by Sarah Longwell.
I'll take
She's, of course, an anti-Trumper at the Bulwark who does focus groups. When I say she's at the Bulwark, she's like co-publisher.
Oh.
So she's very involved with them. But
I see.
This is at The Atlantic. What GOP voters have told me since Trump's indictment, they're open to an alternative to the former president, but his rivals can't touch him. Since the indictment, Republicans, including those running against him, have rallied to Trump's defense. His fundraising has surged.
All right.
He's racked up endorsements. Meanwhile, his Republican opposition is floundering. Nikki Haley's apparently double counting her fundraising. Mike Pence is getting booed by party hardliners. Asa Hutchinson, who said this was disqualifying for Trump. Tim Scott and Vivek Ramaswamy, who said, of course you should ignore this trial because, it's a joke. So they run in obscurity. And Ron DeSantis is the only candidate within hailing distance, and his campaign is sputtering, which is a kind way to put it.
Mm-hmm. I was like, what's inhaling distance? Oh, yeah, I see what you
over
mean.
The course of hundreds of focus groups I've conducted, a large chunk of GOP voters have made clear they would be content with a nominee other than Trump, a Trump-like figure without the baggage. They like that he's a fighter, but after 8 years of Trump, they are looking for new alternatives. But if you give them one, they don't take it.
It's a funny thing to consider. Trump without the baggage. I mean, Trump is the baggage. That's
right.
The point of Trump.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
So it's a very interesting thing.
Yes.
And this also comes to mind, and that is there's a new survey out for New Jersey only, which sort of illustrates the point. It's by Dan Cassino at Fairleigh Dickinson.
Okay.
And the
New
FDU
Jersey
poll
only.
Looks at Trump
Yes,
legal
no,
woes
and FU.
help Christie in primary challenge. Trump trounces Christie.
Okay.
But Christie improves 8 points if you split the electorate you're asking, if you split the poll takers, and half of them you just ask who do you want, Trump or Christie, and it's like 40 Trump, 21 Christie.
Yeah.
But if you tell them Trump's indicted and here's what he's indicted about, who would you like, Trump or Christie? It's still 40% Trump, but Christie pops up to 28.
I don't know what to
So the point is, if you keep honing in on Trump's legal woes, you make other people besides Trump more attractive, but you don't change Trump's relative standing. That's because everybody already knows who he is and has decided whether to vote for him or not based on what they already know. And that's why there's nothing surprising about a jury guy who watches Temple podcast, Tim Pool podcast, who listens to Tim Pool podcasts or watches him on YouTube, would still vote to indict him.
Yeah, or
I'm a Trump
hold
voter.
him liable.
I think he's guilty. I don't care. I'm still a Trump voter.
Right,
I mean,
right.
This is
I
not,
wonder if that came up in the jury room.
Hard to understand because, like, most of them are like that.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's why the
makes
Access
a certain amount of
Hollywood tape
sense.
didn't really change anything.
I guess so. Like you could have that discussion in the jury room, and I'm a huge Trump supporter. But I mean, he did do this thing.
Of course he did this.
I don't care, right? And they say that I don't care, and you say, well, if you don't care, then what's the problem with going ahead and finding him liable? It doesn't make any difference to you, and it won't change your mind. So why fight if you don't care? And I mean, that's. At first, I'd say, well, that's
essentially
logic.
what Judge Acapina told the jury, and they said, okay, I'll go with that.
But I guess it worked this time.
It worked.
Whereas normally they would say, I don't care about logic, screw that too. But I guess this guy, I don't know, whatever. Right? So, Tim Pool, huh? All right.
Yeah, so just a very interesting thing. Now, this is a list. Igor Bobek put together a list of responses from senators.
I didn't see the trial.
No, it's actually more interesting.
I didn't see the tweet about the trial. What?
Because you go the gamut from Mitt Romney to Tom Tuberville.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example.
All right.
GOP Senator Mike Rounds. You never like to hear a former president has been found in civil court guilty of these types of actions. He meant libel, but we'll forgive him.
He's a senator.
I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on the
Come on,
podcast.
Senator.
Asked if he could support someone found liable of battery. Rounds said, well, I'd have a difficult time. That doesn't mean he wouldn't.
Right, of course not.
But then he went ahead and said Tim Scott's really wonderful.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that he's contractually obligated to say something.
Right, and when
like
Tim Scott has no traction and isn't the nominee, the question is what happens.
Right.
Senator John Neely Kennedy, is that his name, Neely?
I don't know, but it's
they
not
threw
really
in his
Kennedy.
middle name so that you wouldn't confuse him with John Kennedy.
John
Kennedy,
F.U. Kennedy
of Louisiana declined to comment.
Ah.
I don't have anything for you. I haven't written my folksy, persona yet. My writer's just looking back to me, but there's a writer's strike, so I can't really say anything until the strike's over.
Yeah, okay.
It's not like I write my own material.
Yeah, he occasionally does a little bit of a, you probably shouldn't, talk up a guy who's a sexual predator. But he's looking for a way to find a different way to do it.
Senator Kramer says he sees no reason to doubt the jury, but he won't rule out supporting Trump. Obviously, I'd rather have a president that isn't found liable for battery.
Yeah, me too.
It's not a disqualifier, but it's certainly not a check in the plus column.
Where will I find one among the 300 million people in the country?
Senator Cassidy, of course, creates concern. Rick Scott, he said he didn't do it, but actually, I don't know.
I don't even know what that means, but okay, that's Rick Scott for you.
Rick Scott, asked if he could support somebody found liable of sexual battery. He said, I don't know, it's a New York jury.
Wow. I don't know what that. All right.
Right.
Fine.
Steve Daines, who just endorsed Trump, said, sounds like President Trump's legal team will be appealing. Marco Rubio, the jury's a joke. The whole case is a joke.
Wow. Florida men going all in on anti-New York. That's anti-Semitic, everybody.
Right. Romney?
Yeah.
What do you think Romney said?
Romney said, this is horrible.
He did.
Jerk.
He said the jury reached a decision, and I hope the jury of the American people reach the same conclusion. We need a different nominee to be the nominee for president. He's in no position to be president of the United States. Think of him what you will. Romney and Cheney are different than the rest of the Republicans.
They are, and it's just so funny how in isolation when it was him as the nominee, Romney is a jerk.
Him twice,
but
for the
what
record.
Can I tell you? Yeah,
when it came to push comes to shove, he put his money where his mouth is.
Yeah, bad. He might be a terrible.
He's terrible
president.
in everything else. Don't get me wrong, but on this, he's pretty principled.
All right, pretty good.
And that contrast, let's say, with Senator Tuberville, who said the New York verdict against Trump, quote, and I love this quote,
oh boy,
makes me want to vote for him twice, unquote.
Mm-hmm.
So not only is he liable, but I'm going to commit a felony.
Yeah, and that's great. It makes me want to vote for him twice, and maybe even drop my own trousers in Bergdorf Goodman. I mean, that's what he's telling you. He wants to emulate him. He's watch out for him, ladies. Don't get alone with him, I would say. Just
right.
Personally.
And then he also went with, well, it's a New York jury, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, so anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
It's a globalist George Soros New York jury, everybody.
Right. And then Senator Lummis, whoever that is.
Oh, yeah. Cynthia.
Yeah. People who love Trump, love Trump. People who hate Trump, hate Trump. Not going to make a difference.
Okay.
That's probably true.
Yeah, I mean,
but,
right.
You know,
all I can say is it's not
but that's probably
ultimate
true.
Garbage and completely upside down and backwards. It is true. It just doesn't tell us much. Okay.
Right.
So what is she? Is she from Wyoming? I can't
probably.
She should be if she's not. All right. I'm trying to remember exactly where all these people are from. It doesn't make that much difference, but okay, it does to them.
So, and that brings up a really unusually interesting for me, because I don't usually find Ross Downtown interesting. But he took a look at the Tucker Carlson
Wyoming it is.
position.
All right. Yes.
Wyoming it is. Thorngill, a Twitter analyst of elections, says going from a cable TV audience to Twitter will be the single biggest thing the movement to launder white nationalism can do to become irrelevant. The GOP base doesn't live on Twitter, folks. It lives on Facebook and TV. And he's really, Thorngill's talking about the fact that the Fox News audience is like 70 and older.
Yes, they don't, if it's not
and
on
they're
their
not going to go on Twitter to watch Tucker Carlson.
No,
but
I don't think
Dowd
they
has a
think
slightly different point of view, which I think is an interesting one.
Oh.
Basically saying what Tucker Carlson did, for whatever reason, is take his cynicism, maybe being pounded by Jon Stewart publicly and being embarrassed, the way Trump did by Obama at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and, decide to run for president because of it. But Tucker Carlson was heckled at one of the conservative conferences for, suggesting that, when push comes to shove, you have to get down to it and elect the most electable conservative, and sort of the old-fashioned happy conservative who just pushes low taxes and small government sort of thing, and that was rejected by Jon Stewart and by the public and by his own conservative public, and so he turned into one of these supervillains who went all white nationalists. But what Dowd lays out is the fact that the shift is essentially into what younger conservatives now see as the future of the conservative movement, which Dowd isn't happy about, by the way. Which is just skepticism. Like, don't believe anything. Like, older conservatives would be against the Democratic Party, but for the CIA and for the Army, and modern conservatives reject everything. I don't trust the Department of Defense. I don't trust the government. I don't trust the CIA. I don't trust cable. I don't trust Fox. I don't trust you. I don't trust anything. And Tucker Carlson embodies that.
Okay. Well, I don't trust him, so I guess he does.
Hence the Q connection.
Yeah. All right. Wow. Well, we'll be back in 2 minutes to discuss it further.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. While we were away, I want to thank the news universe for waiting for the break to break new news, because now we could read it, point out that we have it,
on George
and
Santos.
announce
We'll get to it in a moment.
Okay.
I'm going to finish up this piece by Russ Dowdhat, who's writing about Carlson. He writes in a recent interview with the Full Send podcast, Carlson was asked about his greatest regret. He said, first, supporting and defending the Iraq War. I see. My point is that he used to be a down-the-middle conservative. Yeah. Now he's sorry about it.
Because
and then
Trump
second,
opposes it.
He says, quote,
Not
for
really.
too long I participated in the culture where anybody who thinks outside these pre-prescribed lanes is crazy or a conspiracy theorist, and I really regret that. I'm ashamed that I did that, and partly it was age and the world I grew up in. So when you look at me and say, yeah, of course the media is part of the means of control, that's obvious to you because you're 28, but I didn't see it, and I'm ashamed of that.
I don't know what that means.
So Dowdhat links him with Richard Hofstadter's famous essay, The Paranoid Style in American Politics.
Mm-hmm.
And that was directed whiteward, but of course Dowdhat said, but I, as a conservative, knew that this was all about the left. Hippies, don't trust anybody over 30, Michael Moore, Oliver Stone, Noam Chomsky. They were the ones who were paranoid, not us.
Okay.
But now it's Tucker Carlson and young people. And so, that's where things have gone. So I just thought it was interesting in terms of people's reaction to the Trump liability trial with the indictments and guilty verdicts perhaps ahead. Meanwhile, not like 10 minutes after we got the result of the E. Jean Carroll trial, then we hear that George Santos was indicted by a federal grand jury. And the, again, interesting thing about that, because they didn't unseal the charges until this morning, which is the breaking news.
I didn't even realize that.
What we knew is that Santos was indicted,
but I mean,
and that if a federal Department of Justice attorney, DA, wants to work on something like this, you don't necessarily hear about it. They're perfectly capable of doing this quietly without any leaks. Mm-hmm. Nobody had any inkling this was coming.
Well,
so every time you say, well, what's Jack Smith doing? And how come Merrick Garland didn't, that's not how they work. This is how
that's worth pointing out. I mean, yeah, on the one hand, yes, we didn't know the details or particulars or the timing of it.
We knew he did stuff.
Come on, we all knew
something
something
he was under
coming.
Investigation, but we had no idea it was going to drop yesterday.
And then
today we learn Santos for Congress charged with 13 counts, including wire fraud, money laundering, theft of public funds, and making materially false statements to the House of Representatives. Theft of public funds, so presumably that's about campaign violations. Yeah. And this is more than just a slap on the wrist. He'll be arraigned this afternoon in central Islip, Long Island. A CNN story said House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and this was from yesterday, said that he'll look at the charges before determining if he thinks Santos should be removed from Congress. I'll look at the charges, he said.
No, he won't.
Now, Santos told his staff not to report to work today. Presumably, he'll be in Islip to be arraigned.
So why don't they go to work?
And McCarthy has this issue where he's trying to do this debt ceiling things, and he's probably just lost a vote. But
he doesn't have to do that concession anymore either.
Well, the weird dynamics are still very unclear to me about whether or not it's actually better for Democrats if Santos stays but doesn't vote, or whether it's better that he resigns. If he does resign, there'll be a new election. Kathy Hochul gets to call a new election, and a Democrat will be elected to that
but not quickly.
Area, but not for a while. So is it better for Democrats if he stays but doesn't vote? Or is it better for Democrats if he leaves? He's not going to be replaced by a Democratic vote, but I don't know if there's really any difference one way or the other.
Not quickly.
It's just that with a one-vote majority or a two-vote majority on this debt limit bill that just passed, what's the best possible outcome for Democrats? It's certainly the worst possible outcome for McCarthy, because essentially you might argue Santos is the reason why McCarthy's speaker. There were so few votes that every single one of them mattered. Yeah, Matt Gaetz. Marjorie Taylor Greene, but also Santos. Right. And Santos knew that. And unlike the others except for Greene, was perfectly happy to hold Kevin McCarthy hostage over it. He was great at it. He, as a grifter, he knew what buttons to push, and he knew McCarthy was weak and couldn't say no to him and couldn't stand up to him. So Santos was pushing everything. I'm not going to vote for this debt relief because you have some work requirements that I want to see settled. That's not why you're doing it. What else is McCarthy going to have to promise you? So, Kevin McCarthy promised me he wouldn't kick me out of Congress. Now I'll vote for the bill.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Right. Well, we'll have to see how this...
well, that's gone. He doesn't have that leverage anymore.
Yeah. I can't imagine him and not... like the option of him staying in Congress but not voting. I don't think that's an option. He's going to cast a vote. I mean, as long as he's there, they kind of have to let him unless they're going to expel him. But then he's not there. So, but what he does with the vote is another thing.
Well, it's not clear. I mean, he quit his committees.
Yeah.
McCarthy said, I never really liked this guy. I never appointed him to any committee, which is a lie. He appointed him to committees, and Santos said, I'm not serving. It's not clear that, the atmosphere is right for me to get anything done.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, I don't think he was on any committees that would have a vote that was significant for this debt ceiling.
He's not
issue,
a significant congressman in that sense,
no.
other than things that, as a whole, the House of Representatives has to do.
As long as he's a member, he has that vote, and there's no stopping him from using it.
Well, that's going to be really interesting, because what happens after he's indicted? There's no rules that say once you're indicted that you have to stop voting. There's no rules that say you have to resign.
Right.
But on the other hand, Dianne Feinstein is coming back to the Senate, she says.
Yes.
And
that's what I would
maybe
say.
she is and maybe she isn't, and there's no rules for that. And there's no rules for any of this stuff. So it's really hard to see how any of this plays out and what it means in capital letter, what it all means if that's in capital letters. But I can't imagine that this is helping McCarthy or Republicans in any way, shape, or form. On the one hand,
it's helping
you have
John McCain.
A New York jury said that Trump is liable, and on the other hand, a federal grand jury said that Santos is a crook and a liar, which we all knew. But what's it mean for future votes for us, and are we going to support him? And if you ask the so-called moderate members, there aren't any real moderates. There are conservatives pretending to be moderate from the New York delegation. They'll say we wanted Santos out from the beginning, which is true. They did because they felt it tarred them with a Republican brush.
Yeah, you could ask them.
It does.
Ask them about New York juries.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, what about New York?
That guy said it was a New York jury. Is that a bad thing? That's your good question for what's her name?
Yeah.
Stefanik.
Yeah, I got your New York jury right here.
Yeah. She'd probably be willing to say, yeah, well, I mean, New York City juries anyway. She would probably differentiate that way. But I mean, a New York jury found him guilty. He's from New York, and that's where his crimes happen for the most part.
Right.
So, what are you going to do?
So other news, by the way, price increases slow as high interest rates take effect. Inflation moderated to 4.9% the year through April, the 10th straight month of declines in inflation. So despite Republicans' best efforts, inflation is dropping, and we're not in a recession.
They did charge Trump to distract from inflation.
Yeah, something like that. The polls are out, and they show a close race, and Natalie Jackson, writing in National Journal, said, well, that's to be expected. Polls this far out don't tell you anything except that it's likely to be a close election. So good. Polls these days, if you look at them, what do they tell you? They're telling you half the country are Democrats and half the country are Republicans when it comes to voting.
Right.
We already knew that.
And 40% of the country is I'm for rape guy.
Something like that.
Just, that's what's happening.
So all of that. So two things then. Do you want to get meta, or do you want to do something specific?
What is meta?
Meta. Let's do meta. This is a really interesting piece by Will Salatan in the Bulwark.
Huh.
He did a special project looking at Lindsey Graham.
It is meta. Okay.
Right? And he says, look, I set out to research the story of Lindsey Graham's relationship with Trump, not because I wanted something specific and unique to Lindsey Graham, but rather look at Graham as a metaphor for the Republican Party as a whole. I wanted to understand how authoritarianism arose in the United States. I wanted to see how the poison worked. I wanted to see the corruption, the rationalizations, the vulnerabilities. I wanted to learn how democracies could detect such threats and counteract them. And here are some lessons I learned by looking at Lindsey Graham. And he had a long, detailed story about, from the beginning to, Lindsey Graham running for president, losing badly, looking around and finding the two people he despised the most, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, were the two standing left to run. And he compared it to being shot versus being poisoned. It didn't really matter. They both stink.
All right.
And then he went with Trump because he said being poisoned is better because maybe you could find an antidote versus being shot. You get killed right away.
Huh.
And Cruz was being shot and Trump was being poisoned.
I see.
And then he went to, okay, well, I don't know. And then he went to January 6th. This is terrible. And then he went to, of course I support him. And so he detailed all of that. And he said, here are some lessons I learned. Emerging authoritarianism doesn't look like an ideology. It appears in the form of a demagogue. It's easy to support him while laughing off the idea you're embracing authoritarianism. Celebration of fear is a warning sign. When a demagogue brags about intimidating his enemies, look out, because he knows who the real villains are, or maybe he's just the sort of person who attacks anybody in his way anyway. Authoritarian voters are the underlying threat. In every country, there's people who want a leader to break institutions and rule with an iron fist. So Trump isn't the problem. Trumpism is, in other words. Political parties are footholds for authoritarians. An aspiring strongman doesn't have to gain power all at once. He can start by capturing a party, becoming the flagship candidate, and that gives everybody in the party a reason to support him.
Yeah, well, sure, okay.
Politicians are blinded by their arrogance. They think they can manipulate an emerging authoritarian by collaborating with him. Right? That's Lindsey Graham.
Okay.
I can control Hitler kind of thing.
All right. I mean, that's not great bragging point.
Politicians are misled by personal contact. He may seem charming or manageable, but that's because he's among friends and flatterers. Right? That doesn't reflect how we'll treat people who get in the way, including you.
That is true.
Cowardice is enough to empower an authoritarian. He doesn't need a phalanx of wicked accomplices. He just needs weak-willed politicians to get out of his way. Authoritarianism is a trait. Politicians can always find reasons why this or that isn't prosecutable. It's not impeachable. These excuses gloss over the underlying problem, which is the personality. If he gets away with one abuse, he'll move on to the next. We see that with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And that's why the E. Jean Carroll, well, no, you're actually responsible for what you do. I mean, forget about all the Trump organization stuff. This is directly tied to you personally. All the other stuff you could blow off as business. Or it was your kids. Or it was the accountant.
Yeah.
But this
those
is
would
you.
be lies, but yes, you can get away with some of those lies.
Yeah. I didn't commit sexual battery with E. Jean Carroll.
Trump
My kids
organization
did
it. That's some claim.
The accountant
it was
did.
Ivanka. What?
You can't blame me. No, you can't do that anymore.
Okay.
Land's right at his feet, and that's why it's so fascinating.
Alan Weissenberg.
Democracy becomes a rationale to serve the authoritarian. Power becomes a rationale to serve the authoritarian. Rationalization becomes a skill and a habit. All you have to do is see people who do the what about, what about Hunter Biden?
Exactly.
Ad hoc legal defenses become authoritarianism. Just watch any of Trump's lawyers. Normalization and polarization are enough to create a mass authoritarian movement. Demonization of the opposition paves the way to tyranny. One of the reasons I hate demonizing even MAGA people. I just leave them and say, you can't convince them, move on. I don't like demonizing the opponent. I don't think that helps. A party detached from its principles becomes a cult. We've seen that with Trump. Democracy's culture of compromise is a weakness over time. An authoritarian's will to gain and wield power grinds down politicians who are content to negotiate among competing interests. Take that as a lesson on the debt ceiling, which is what we'll cover for the rest of the segment here.
Oh, all right.
Right? Don't go in there thinking what you're supposed to do is compromise. That's the way the entire press covers the debt ceiling thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're supposed to compromise. Compromise is the thing. It's the ideal. And every time Biden says he doesn't compromise, well, that can't stand. That's ridiculous. He's in a bad position. He's under pressure to compromise. What about the Republicans? Republicans come in and say, I'm going to do this thing which is so ridiculous, it's going to wreck the entire country. Well, they're, look at how they stand together. That's how you're covering this?
Well, yeah, I guess they're used to doing it that way.
They're so used to doing it, they can't imagine Biden saying, I think I'll look at this 14th Amendment thing, which is actually a story out in Politico. They couldn't conceive of the fact that the Democrats might just not capitulate, that they don't want to compromise with and negotiate with terrorists. They can't conceive of it. So democracy's culture of compromise can be a weakness. It can be a strength too, depending upon circumstance, of course. Civil servants are easily smeared and purged. We've seen that with every public health official who ever tried to do anything about the pandemic in good faith. It's easy to provoke and exploit violence without endorsing it. Just stand back and stand by, Proud Boys, who are now guilty of seditious conspiracy, by the way.
They are, in fact.
It's easy to rationalize ethnic or religious persecution and, sexual. Look at trans people. Demagogues tend to use any division in society, ethnic, sexual, religious, as a wedge against their enemies. A skilled politician can excuse this behavior on the grounds that bigotry is only the method, not the motive.
What I mean, all right, I guess.
So, it's a pretty interesting look.
If you use
there are
it, you're
actually 7 different stories he wrote, 7 different chapters in this whole long thing about how Lindsey Graham fits all of this.
Yeah. But just
and he deserves it. Lindsey Graham deserves this kind of treatment. But it's sort of interesting. That's where we're at, and that's why it's so frustrating, and yet understandable, but still frustrating, to see people react to the results of something like the Trump Eugene Carroll trial, being found liable, and saying, on the one hand, I don't believe the verdict because it's a New York jury.
Yeah.
To, on the other hand, well, good. I'm glad he's found liable. Now I'll vote for him twice. These are senators.
Yeah, it is pretty remarkable. And
go back and look at that whole thing that Will Salveson wrote about how authoritarianism happens. You're seeing it right before your eyes.
Yeah. That's it puts me in mind of I'm just thinking back to learning in class about the founders and their vision for the way things would play out under the Constitution and the mischiefs of faction, but that all of this we would protect it against it by the jealous guarding of prerogatives among the various members of the different branches, and I don't think they modeled for a Lindsey Graham type that just says the power that comes with being a member of the Senate is something I willingly sacrifice in pursuit of continuing to hold on to it. Like, that doesn't even make any logical sense. I just want to be reelected as a senator, even though I have demonstrated that my only use for the power is to capitulate and relinquish it to an autocratic leader. So why do you want to stay in the Senate? I don't know exactly. That's a good question.
My Republican Twitter friend, Evan Siegfried, by the way, yesterday had tweeted, what's the over-under on Santos' charging document having more than 6 aliases?
Yeah, that's, I guess.
But
6
this morning, just now, he tweeted about the indictment really being something of note here. Look, 7 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, 1 count theft of public funds, and 2 counts of making materially false statements to Congress. What does Kevin McCarthy do with that?
We don't think that they were materially false, and then the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. Yeah, I don't know. He just does nothing and says, if they convict him, now, that, I guess that'll be the next stage. Well, we'll see what the jury has to say. You said you were waiting to find out what the charges were.
I
didn't
that's
mean that.
an untenable position to take. You can try that, but that ain't going to fly.
Oh, well, then you should try it, Kevin. Stuff. Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know what else there is to do, so I mean,
the point is you're besmirching Congress by letting somebody in Congress who does these things to Congress.
Yes, and that's something that members of the Democrats can speak to. They can bring a privileged motion about it and say this is a question of the privileges of the House. That's a privileged motion, and they'll have to get debate time, and they won't necessarily get a vote on the floor, but they should bring a motion to expel him.
And Kevin McCarthy can't stop that.
Yeah, that's true. So they can get themselves some floor time. He can have a little bit of control over when they get to speak. But if Hakeem Jeffries or a designee of Jeffries brings it, the minority leader makes a motion as a point of the question of the privileges of the House, that's something that he can't delay for very long. So there you go. That's something to do, Jeffries.
See? So, I think it's important, and I think McCarthy's response to it isn't simply rote.
Okay.
R-O-T,
Let's see.
not W-R-O-T, which I think he did right beforehand. It's all ready to go with, but I don't think it's going to work.
I have a rote response for you. What do you mean? You're going to give us a rote response? Yeah, it's right here on this card.
Yeah, it was written by ChatGPT.
Right. I wonder what that would say. I still haven't used it for anything, but I guess if you say, tell me something that Kevin McCarthy could possibly offer as cover for George Santos, I'd love to see what it has to say.
Yeah. Anyway, in the remaining time we have, this is a really interesting guest essay in the New York Times. This is what would happen if Biden ignores the debt ceiling and calls McCarthy's bluff.
All right.
There are powerful legal reasons and arguments for him to do so. These include the 14th Amendment, which prohibits questioning what we already owe, and the so-called later-in-time rule of statutory construction, which basically means that Congress's most recent budget legislation trumps any earlier legislated ceiling. Given the stakes, it's important to explore the likely consequences if Biden ignores the debt ceiling, how doing so would affect our economy and the markets, our retirement savings, and even our constitutional system. It's encouraging news for the president and those who follow our first Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, in believing we must pay our legally incurred debt. We're far better off doing so, even if it means short-term chaos, should Mr. Biden allow the June 1st deadline to come and go.
Yeah, well, they shot.
And then he goes on in detail. But it's interesting that there's some legal aspects for and rationale for doing something other than negotiate with Kevin McCarthy.
True.
Biden says he's exploring the 14th Amendment to diffuse debt ceiling standoff. This is an article by Jennifer Haberkorn in Politico, May 9th, 2023. That's last night. What would the GOP plan actually do to the budget, says the New York Times? Actually would cut things as much as 50%. If every agency is cut, there's an 18% cut across the board. But if you preserve defense, veterans, health, and border security, then Health and Human Services takes a 51% cut, and so does everything else: education, housing, urban development, justice, state, transportation, everything else. Take labor, Treasury, veterans, NASA, agriculture, everything, 51% cut. So these are draconian, drastic things. And Biden would be well within his rights to highlight this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Sarah Binder has an interesting piece in Brookings. Don't count on the House discharge rule to raise the debt limit. Basically, what she says is it only works 4% of the time.
Yeah.
No matter how well you think you've planned it out, you're not going to get the votes.
Very unlikely. I mean, try, but...
Right. But as she points out, we talked about this on the show the other day. This year, Democrats planned ahead. A junior Democrat quietly introduced a decoy debt limit bill this past January to get the discharge clock ticking. The Democrats may still run out of time before the government hits default date, even if every Democrat and 5 GOP members sign the petition. The Bipartisan Policy Center calculates that the earliest the House could vote to discharge a special rule to advance the decoy bill would be June 7th.
Okay, that might be too late.
And that might be too late, depending.
Yeah, but maybe they could stretch it out if they really intend to. If they feel like they have the votes for it, the Treasury might find some way. I mean,
to pay for it for a week.
Yeah. By the way, I mean, one good way to find the extra time is if you're the Treasury Secretary, come out and say, we found a way to make it work and extend things for that long. And people would say, how does it work? And you'd say, well, you take the coefficient of the blah, 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 and then people will print it. And then all of a sudden, what do you know? It does have, it does work.
Polonium.
No, I made it up.
You know, it's radioactive and it decays. It'll be gone by the end of the week. But, you know, during that week, you're covered.
That's an idea. A polonium coin. I mean, no one will ask to see it. That's for sure. You made $1 trillion polonium coin? Yes, I did. Show it to me. Are you sure?
You doubt it? You hold it.
That's the answer. It's made of polonium. You want to take a look? No.
Works well for the Russians.
Believe you.
Try it.
All right. Well, that one I wouldn't necessarily want to put Eugene Carroll on.
She concludes with, still, a slim GOP majority, uncertainty about the path ahead, and the high stakes of government default mean no potential solution can be summarily dismissed.
Okay.
However, swing district GOP members might, if anything, be more loyal and reliable team players for the GOP leadership than far-right colleagues, probably to fend off primary challenges from the right. This whole primary challenge thing means that you cannot in any way, shape, or form count on GOP members to do the right thing ever in any district. Well, what about the fact that they're a Biden district? Well, if they vote with you on this in their Biden district, they'll get primary from the right, and they care far more about that than they do about the general election, which they'll go on to lose. But you can't get into the general election until you get past the primary.
Yeah. I wonder, I guess, I mean, you're the farther right you are already, murdering Trader Green.
Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't worry about primary.
Yeah, I'm not worried about primary.
It's not even in her thinking.
Although, I mean, you could say you should worry because, no one in their right mind would think that they could outflank you from the right. The problem is that the people we would recruit would not be in their right minds. So Are you worried about that?
And then finally, our friend Marcy Wheeler, in her headline, it's a nice story, but in her headline really, encapsulates everything here. She has a piece which is entitled, "Feds Charge the Deciding Vote That Made Kevin McCarthy Speaker."
Okay. That's nice.
And that would be George Santos.
Yeah.
So interesting stuff. So McCarthy now has to juggle both the Santos problem and the debt ceiling problem at the same time, plus of course, whatever fallout there is from, which doesn't really affect him immediately with Trump and his legal issues. But, I personally think he's pretty weak and is not doing a great job. I don't really care what the D.C. journalists think. That McCarthy did a great thing because he pulled off a 2-vote win on something that Democrats figured he'd lose on by promising the right wing everything. And they somehow think that's a win. I think it makes him even weaker and less of a position, and it strengthens Biden's hand in going 14th Amendment and other things.
Yeah.
But they just don't see it because it's not their mindset.
Yeah. And I guess, you could take Marcy's headline as a model and go a step further and say that McCarthy's big win came after negotiating a settlement with a member of Congress who was then immediately federally charged with making materially false statements to Congress. So the basis of your deal is with the guy who's now being charged with, among other things like wire fraud and various other scams, lying to all of you there in Congress. So what is your deal exactly?
Right. And then we'll just end this segment.
All right.
With a upbeat.
Oh, I see. Yes.
There's a lot of reports about
Oops, I'm late.
Russia.
Yes.
Reporting from within Russia what defeat for Russia might look like. In Ukraine.
Leaving, I guess. Something like that.
They're losing and they know it is the point.
Okay. All right. Well, that
used to be you couldn't even talk about it. Now they're talking about it.
Okay. You have to get used to it. It's nice that they've come to the acceptance stage. All right. Thanks, Greg. I guess we won't speak again until Monday.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
All right, we are back after a while. We finally get around to it. Hey, so we're back. Thank you for joining us here on the second hour of today's Kagro in the Morning Show. All right, I shared with Greg on his way out the door when you couldn't hear it, but I had every intention of letting you hear it. This fantastic one-liner here from LOL GOP via Mastodon, noting, once again, I guess file this in the every Republican accusation is a confession file. And by the way, that formula is catching on everywhere. We see it, everyone picking up on the phrasing. But here's this liner. Republicans finally have proof that a man who wears makeup and a wig has committed sexual assault in a changing room, and now they won't even use it. That's because, of course, the guy wearing the makeup and wig, or whatever the hell you might call that thing on his head, is their guy for president. But there you have it, makeup and a wig, and it's not the drag queens that they're talking about. It's Donald Trump. All right, well, at any rate, so what about the Santos thing? I guess I don't know. I don't think I even realized that they had not unsealed the charges on Santos until this morning. But now they are. I guess I gotta open this up and save it so I can share it with you here. I gotta open it in a new tab here so that I can show you the fun and exciting. Is this the way to do it? I don't even know. LOL GOP stuff when crap. I'm not even sure how I can save it. The weird tweet deck like whatchamacallit that we keep here, that I use from for Mastodon doesn't make it particularly easy to open up the dang it. All right. Well, at any rate, I don't know. Do we really have to prove to you that LOL GOP said something funny? You probably believe it. I don't know that it necessarily needs extra attention. Anyway, I was taking a look at some of the discussion here on Mastodon about the unsealing of the charges on George Santos, and this looked like an interesting thread to follow here. I'm looking at the toot of Nicholas Weaver, who's reacting to Pope Hat discussing this stuff. Pope Hat saying to him at some point, and for some reason, of course, the number of counts is irrelevant. You know, as people are walking around saying, well, there's 5 counts of wire fraud and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, I guess to some extent that is irrelevant. It's the decision, though, to add money laundering something that makes it gratuitous. What's gratuitous? Let's see. It's Nicholas Weaver saying, gotta love federal prosecutor rubble bouncing. That is to say, aggressive charging, right? Santos is accused of defrauding only 2 donors, which somehow, I guess, you know, and it makes sense how, but it turns into 5 wire fraud counts and 3 money laundering counts. Defrauding unemployment becomes 3 counts as well, 1 count of theft and 2 counts of wire fraud for 2 of the payments, and 2 counts for lying on his house financial disclosure form. And so, I guess at bottom, when you really ask, well, what did he do? Then, you know, there's 2 or 3 things that he did, and you're chargeable under different statutes and for different instances under the same statute. But yeah, that's true. Prosecutors, not just federal prosecutors, but prosecutors of all kinds will pile up as many charges as possible for 2 or 3 strategic reasons, not the least of which is letting you know how much trouble you're in the hopes that you will say, you know, I got to cop a plea here, but also to give juries every opportunity to find a way to find you guilty, that if something goes wrong with the nature of the proof or evidence that you're going to offer on one of the counts, you can always get them on the other one. And of course that too, Bill, you know, that also plays into the plea bargaining context by saying, you know, when people like to brag and blow off the charges in a fit of braggadocio there, you got nothing, you're evident, you got no evidence. Well, you know, what we're telling you is we have lots of evidence, and B, you think we can't prove it on this case, this instance, this charge, but we can definitely prove it on this one. And we feel pretty good about our chances of proving it on this one too. And the real question you have to ask yourself is, can you beat every single rap and get away with it? Because the odds of beating one, you know, well, you might think are 50-50. We think they're more like 90-10 in our favor. But can you beat 5, 10, 15 of them? That's a different question. And usually that does cause people, give people pause and make them think about taking a plea instead. All right. So, you know, I mean, should we get the details on these things? The latest story I have on it is from the Times, but is this yesterday's? It is. It's updated this morning at 9:30. So, they've probably had a look at the charges. The Times, New York Times reporting I have on it from Michael Gold, William K. Rashbaum, and Grace Ashford. Headline being George Santos is said to face federal criminal charges. He is said to face them because he faces them. And when people talk about George Santos and what he's facing, the answer is federal criminal charges. It's a headline from yesterday when they hadn't yet been unsealed, I guess. The first-term Republican congressman's extensive lies on the campaign trail and questionable financial dealings were the focus of criminal and ethical inquiries. Now they've turned into charges. And the update here is, and links to live updates. George Santos has turned himself in to face charges, which if you wanted to, misread that, George Santos has turned himself in to face charges. whatever that would mean. But okay, that he's turned himself in. I guess we could look at the live updates. That won't tell us anything about those charges, though. And let's see, the specific charges against Santos as of last night were not yet clear, but I guess they are now. And yeah, I mean, this write-up probably doesn't tell us too much. Let's see, FBI, federal prosecutors in Nassau County District Attorney's Office have also been investigating Santos's role in brokering that $19 million luxury yacht deal. But that, I guess, doesn't enter into it. And there's no, particular charge for falsifying his resume. So, I don't know. There's McCarthy saying he doesn't know what he's going to do about it. And then there was, maybe I should look at the live updates page and see what they've got. Let's click through to that. Let's see. Here we are. Live updates. George Santos is in custody facing federal charges. That's a slightly different feeling story. The scandal-plagued congressman who ran on a life story littered with lies was charged in a wide-ranging indictment with wire fraud, money laundering, stealing public funds, and lying on federal disclosure forms. And let's see what's up at the top. Santos had been under investigation for his campaign finances and other activities. Charged with 7 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, 1 count of theft of public funds, 2 counts of making materially false statements to the House of Representatives. And the decision by federal prosecutors to take action against Santos marked a precipitous turn in the fortunes of a first-term congressman who went from a symbol of Republican resurgence, which they never really resurged, to a scandal-plagued political punching bag. Fun. Santos has been besieged by questions about his background, his personal wealth, and his campaign finances since last December when the Times and other outlets began reporting on numerous lies about his biography, education, and work history that he had told voters on the campaign trail. And of course, we also learned that more localized outlets than the New York Times had been reporting it for quite a while, and people weren't taking notice of it. So, that's an issue too. Subsequent reporting uncovered questions about how Santos had handled the finances of an animal rescue charity he had claimed to operate before running for Congress, and how he mingled his personal business and political campaign, and it also found numerous irregularities on how his campaign spent and raised its funds. Santos, who in recent weeks has courted media attention, including making an appearance outside the Manhattan courthouse where Trump was being arraigned, has not commented publicly on the charges against him, that is himself. A spokeswoman in Washington referred all questions to Santos's lawyer. And I guess that's why he told his crew not to report to work. I don't even want you giving out no comments. Just don't show up, cause you'll just be followed. And there's really nothing you can get done today. You'll just be answering the phone from reporters and telling them no comment over and over again. And if you're a bad employee, you might actually comment. So better that you stay home. Let's see, anything else of interest in here? Not yet clear whether Santos will lodge a plea or if he will be asked to do so in a subsequent hearing. Could be released on his own recognizance, likely to be the case, or required to pay monetary bail. He could be required to turn over his passports. That's of interest too. By the way, reminder, he faces a criminal charge in Brazil for check fraud that stemmed from an episode in 2008. And, who knows what happens there? There's a listing of the charges against Santos as the previous entry in all of this. And, what can I tell you? We already know what they are. Oh, here's Nicholas Fandos says, I just spoke to the chairman of the New York Gop, Ed Cox, who predicted local Republicans would defeat Santos if he does not resign. He's out no matter how you do it because we have a good party in Nassau County. All right. So, that's probably looming over his head too. And he can think about that when he thinks about how he wants to plead to these charges. All right. Back to, let's see, other input sources. And there are many. Let me see. I should take a look over at what's going on Mastodon. And there are a couple things there and a couple things on the Bird site that we might be wise to check in on. There are several. Let's see. I'll scroll back a little bit here. Oh, yeah. Well, that was one story that I thought would be fun to read. We have a couple of Other stories that we could use to fill time tomorrow and the next day. Let's see. I'm going to just jump in here, though, and read some things that I haven't seen before that Patrick Snyder has been sending on our Bird site and elsewhere. Hashtag. Let's see. Wild speculation in 2 tweets. That sounds like something worth reading. I love wild speculation. And if it can be done in 2 tweets, so much the better. And one of the tweets is his own. Let's see. What have we here? The funny thing is that Trump's vanity likely helped sink him. Okay, back to the former guy. Good. He needs glasses, but doesn't like to wear them in public because of how he believes they make him look. Oh, yes, right. And that stems from his disastrous deposition testimony in which he was, of course, now the whole reason that he found himself in a courtroom over this incident in Bergdorf Goodman, despite the fact that the statute of limitations for criminal charges had expired, where we found ourselves in court because Jean Carroll sued him initially for defamation for responding to her allegations, her accusations of rape with with derision and, of course, the famous line of saying, well, I wouldn't have done that because she's not, I don't know who she is. That was a lie. And she's not my type, which is a total misreading of everything that has happened in, rape culture discussion, feminism since forever, and of course the Me Too movement, and everything we've just learned about, like I say, overarching rape culture, that it's not even about sexual attraction or types necessarily, but that even if you don't get that far, even if you don't have to go far afield into theory to get past, is that a lie or a cover story? Because, I would never, he implies as stupidly as possible that I would never sexually assault someone unless they were my type. Well, that's not great. So you would sexually assault people who are your type? That's not what I meant, but that's actually pretty much what you said, certainly what you implied here. And then, of course, there was the disaster of, I've never met her before in my life. Really? Well, here's a picture of you with her. Can you identify for us? Here, take a look at this photo. Tell me, who are the people in this photo? Oh, yeah, well, you think that's me meeting E. Jean Carroll? I'll show you a thing or two. That's not even her. That's Marla Maples. That's my wife. Actually, that is, in fact, the photo of you meeting E. Jean Carroll at about the time that you assaulted her. And, if your whole excuse is, well, I would never sexually assault someone who wasn't my type. One, that's not an excuse. Okay, fine. You're under arrest for sexually assaulting people who are your type. And 2, how do we know she's your type after all? I thought she was Marla Maples, who's your wife, who's presumably your type. So, apparently, when they said that to him, he's like, oh, is that who that is? I can't even see because the photograph it's blurry. It's the photo's fault. It made me think it was Marla Maples because it was blurry. And you can't blurry your way from not my type into exactly my type, for one thing. And for another thing, the photo is not blurry. You're blurry, you stupid idiot. You won't wear your glasses, so everything's blurry. And that's what Patrick's talking about, right? In his deposition, when his lawyer corrected his misidentification of Carroll and then as his then wife, Marla Maples, he said the photo was very blurry. We can see that it's sharply focused and clear. Would he have made that mistake if he was wearing his glasses? Well, I don't know. But he is extremely stupid and, of course, evasive, and he just wants to lie his way out of whatever situation he might be in at the moment. So he might well have said that anyway. And if they said, the picture's clear, you're wearing your glasses, how can you not tell the difference? He would say, oh, that's, liberal lies. Or, he may have said something else. So, yeah. And by way of correction, Patrick says, he mistook Carol for Marla Maples, who he would subsequently, to the time of the photograph, make his next wife. But he was currently at that time still married to Ivana, but I guess just in the process of divorcing her. Is that right? Or it was his current wife Ivana on the right side of the photo, which actually makes it even worse. So, okay, I thought the photo included Marla Maples, but I've never really made a good look at the photo. Although my recollection was, yeah, that's a weird, that was a hairstyle that I don't recall Marla Maples ever wearing, but Ivana wore that hairstyle. That's unusual. And then, of course, that just makes it even worse. So it wasn't Marla Maples in the picture at all. It was E. Jean Carroll and Ivana, but he thought that E. Jean Carroll was Marla Maples. So he thought he was looking at a picture, by the way, of him hanging out with both Ivana and Marla Maples, which would have been pretty awkward, but maybe it happened at some point anyway, but not in that photo. But, by the way, in terms of making your claims about types, like, I don't know who any of these people, it could be Marla Maples, it could be Ivana, it could be E. Jean Carroll. You know what's happening here? You're describing a type to us, sir. So, anyway, we all knew he was a monumental liar and an idiot, and this really just kind of proves it. Plus, he's also vain and won't wear his glasses, and I don't know. I'd say I'd put that under idiot. So, all right, I think that fits neatly into that category. Let's see, other things that have been hanging out in the KITM hashtag lately. I feel like during the break when I scrolled through it, there were a couple of things that I wanted to see. Oh, there's also this. Patrick Snyder had sent me this tweet from Ron Waxman. Who's he responding to here? Shannon Watts, saying that, another gun fail incident that had happened. And Patrick was forwarding this one, and I didn't see this one. 8-month-old fatally shot as mother and father fight over handgun. Texas officials say, I can't believe it happened in Texas. You're embarrassing us, Texas. You're only shooting people at 1.8 times the next leading state. And we should up our game, I guess, is probably what's happening here. All right, well, that's another gun fail incident. I guess that does bring us to something that I had tucked away in pocket from yesterday, just something crossing the transom that I thought was of some interest. Why not spend a little bit of time on this one? You already know that this is the case, but we'll just reiterate it in case you either missed that show or had forgotten. The New York Times, once again, reporting the largest source of stolen guns, ? If you don't know what that source is, the answer is parked cars. Yeah, and we've discussed this before, and it comes up a lot, and we mention it a lot, but cars really have a lot. Cars are the next worst thing, right? Every time gun enthusiasts say, well, what about cars? Cars are enabling a lot of gun violence, actually, as it turns out. Plus, of course, they're used as weapons in their own right. But, cars really, they might say, well, they're responsible for even more deaths than guns if you include indirect death. Not only are people killed in accidents or actually murdered with cars as a weapon, but of course then there's also that their emissions are killing people too. But should we count all of that? But they are also a huge source of stolen guns. And by the way, they're often used to smash in the windows of gun shops during the off hours, where people just run in and do smash and grab robberies of gun stores, and they're responsible for gun thefts in that way. But we're just talking about parked cars, not ones that are used to smash through the window of gun shops. The growing number of firearms kept in vehicles has become a new point of contention in the debates over regulating gun safety, reports Richard Fawcett for The Times on March 25th. And it is datelined Nashville because that's where it's happening with the greatest frequency, as it happens. On a Sunday in January 2022, a Glock 9mm pistol, serial number AFDN 559, disappeared from a Dodge Charger parked near a Midtown Nashville bank after someone smashed in the rear driver's side window. I mean, it was taken, it didn't disappear. And in fact, it appeared later, so it didn't really disappear. But, that's language for you. You could have chosen better, but he's trying to be dramatic. 10 months later, Nashville police officers arrested 3 teenagers suspected in a series of shootings and discovered a cache of weapons in a nearby apartment. Among them was AFDN 559. Forensic analysis would later tie the Glock to 3 shootings. The defense attorneys would tell you that, as it turns out, forensic analysis of the supposedly signature markings that each gun makes on the casings and bullets as they're fired down the barrel, defense lawyers would tell you that's actually quite unreliable. And as it turns out, there are usually many, many guns in circulation that will make pretty much identical markings, so that's a point of contention. But I guess when it comes down to statistics and probability, the probability that any one of those other guns that might make nearly identical markings are A, in the same city, and B, in the possession of the defendant, are pretty low, so I guess that's how it usually stands in the end. But anyway, 10 months later, that forensic analysis would tell us that this gun was not only tied to 3 shootings, but it included an attack in August that wounded 4 youths and another that wounded a 17-year-old girl in September. So it was getting a lot of use. In a country awash with guns, more firearms than people, in fact, the parked car, or in many cases the parked pickup truck, and that becomes relevant in a moment, has become a new flashpoint in the debates over how and whether to regulate gun safety. There is little question about the scope of the problem. A report issued in May by the gun control group Everytown for Gun Safety analyzed FBI crime data in 271 American cities, large and small, from 2020. And found that guns stolen from vehicles have become the nation's largest source of stolen firearms, with an estimated 40,000 guns stolen from cars in those cities alone, which means, of course, that there are thousands more being stolen from cities not included in the 271 looked at by the FBI. In some cities, organized groups of young people have swept through neighborhoods and areas around sports arenas, because yeehaw, looking for weapons left under car seats or in unlocked center consoles or glove compartments. Their work is occasionally, and this has to do with the truck thing. I said the pickup truck becomes relevant. You're cruising through and it's a great idea, actually. It's quite clever to go to the sports arenas, because one, there's a large collection of vehicles there at all times, and 2, the people who own them are busy and inside and in a loud environment and won't hear anything when you're stealing from them. And it's also, the parking lots tend to be large and isolated so that when you smash a window, if a car alarm goes off, 50-50 whether anybody's around to hear it. Better than 50-50, I would say. In addition, though, I said, yeehaw, right? Smash the windows of the pickup truck outside of the football stadium. That's just where people fit the profile. But if you're not sure what the profile is exactly, then I'll continue with this paragraph and you'll figure it out. Their work, that is to say, the work of the organized groups of young people that have sometimes swept through these areas, their work is occasionally made easier by motorists who advise or advertise their right to bear arms, that is, or the fact that they do in fact bear them, whether they have the right or not, with car window stickers promoting favored gun brands, or that declare Molan Labe, a defiant message from ancient Sparta, which roughly translates as, come and take them. And guess what happens? Increasingly, thieves are doing just that. What do you know? And by the way, what could be dumber than a sticker that says, come and take it? I wonder if anybody's ever offered that as a defense in court. I didn't steal it. I was invited to take this gun. Look, here's the sticker. But yeah, lots of people love to, when you buy a gun, I guess like when you buy an Apple computer and it comes with an Apple sticker, like I've always wondered about that. What do I need an Apple sticker for? I don't put stickers on anything, so I don't care. But people who like things like that will do it. And they sometimes stick it on their car, even though the Apple computer they bought has nothing to do with their car, usually. I guess increasingly it does have something to do with your cars, the electric cars that are, anyway, it doesn't matter. But when you buy a gun, I guess you probably also get a decal with that too. And people love to put that. I see the Glock ones and the Sig Sauer ones all the time. Not every brand does it, but they love to put it on there. And I guess that makes them look tough. And it's funny because of course that's supposed to be a crime prevention measure of sorts. You know, they like to put that on there like, don't rob me. I have a Glock or a Sig Sauer or whatever it is. And what it really means is I'm not here. But probably the gun is. It could be that I'm carrying it with me. That's possible. But then in that case, no harm done because I'm not around to shoot you. But many times it means I have the gun I'm talking about or I keep a spare right in here. So that if I'm here when you smash the windows, I'll shoot you. But I'm not here now. That means come and take it. And that's what they do. It is kind of dumb, isn't it? Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Shall we continue then with what we were looking at here? Where were we again? Oh, yes, right. The largest source of stolen guns. Well, let's continue on, just because now I'm interested, and hopefully you are too. Increasingly, we learned, of course, the thieves are doing just that. They're coming and taking them, as the Molon Labe sticker directs them to do. The Everytown researchers found that a decade ago, less than 1/4 of all gun thefts were from cars. In 2020, over half of them were. And I think that may have something to do with just the number of guns and the frequency with which people are able to buy them as we do away with waiting periods thanks to instant background checks, or get into so many states having permitless carry. There's no obvious obstacle to picking up guns as impulse buys, especially if you go to a gun show or something like that. You feel like you want to come away with a souvenir, so you just buy a few, and that means you can keep your part of your stash in your car at all times. Whereas, if guns are rare and precious, you tend to either keep them on you or keep them at home for home protection. But now you figure, well, what's my protection when I'm out and about? I'll stick one in the car and keep it there for protection. But as it turns out, it's in fact just feeding local crime instead. And that's the point of the article. So, by 2020, over half of all gun thefts were from cars. The researchers say more study is needed to understand this shift, I just explained it to you, which has occurred as more states have adopted permitless carry laws, and messages in the gun industry marketing have encouraged Americans to take their weapons with them for personal protection. Or in fact, as Supreme Court decisions have declared that the whole purpose was so that you could take your weapons with you for personal protection. But the truth is, people don't like having the bulk on them, and they like having extra guns around, and they put them in the cars, and now they belong to criminals. Oh well. As the problem has grown, public health officials and lawmakers, some, including some in Tennessee, which is where the story reporting is based, have proposed a rather prosaic solution, encouraging or mandating that gun-toting drivers store their weapons in their vehicles inside of sturdy, lockable gun boxes. I guess that's supposed to be, well, that's the only viable solution. You can't take the guns away from people, so at least you can encourage or mandate responsible ownership. But of course, it doesn't matter to gun enthusiasts. Anything you ask them to do is a terrible imposition and a violation of their Second Amendment rights, and so the answer is no. Gun control advocates are hoping that the adoption of the boxes in cars will come to be seen as a solution that both sides of the gun debate can accept, much as both sides encourage the use of gun safes and trigger locks in the home. Only both sides don't. Some occasional members who are trying to look moderate of the gun enthusiast side will say you really ought to, and a responsible gun owner will. But the vast majority, one, they just think this thing won't happen to them, or two, they don't read newspaper accounts of what's actually going on, so they never find out. Three, there are also outright advocates among the gun enthusiast side who simply say that even asking me to put it in a gun safe is, well, for one thing, it defeats the whole purpose. Lots of people love to do that. Well, you need to stay ready at a moment's notice, and gun violence could be anywhere, and the time it takes to get it out of the lockbox, you could be killed, and So there's lots of people who say, I just philosophically am opposed to lock boxes, to locking holsters. In fact, I'm opposed to keeping my weapon in anything but, what do they say? Condition 1. I have a semi-automatic pistol with me at all times with the round chambered and the hammer cocked. So all I have to do is it's a one-touch thing. I don't even buy pistols with safeties on them because the time it takes to flip the switch on a safety could cost me my life. There's plenty of people like that, much less people who will willingly lock their guns up in boxes. So it's not the case that both sides of the gun debate can accept this. They essentially, there's people out there that just say, I'll advocate you should shoot everyone you meet. Shoot them in the knee and wound them as a warning shot. And then they'll be, one, expected to make a full recovery, and two, they're not dead. So what's the difference? Anyway, I do think that safe storage is where we find a lot of common ground, said Christian Haney, I guess, Hyne, suspiciously close to some of the surnames I had to pronounce yesterday, Vice President of Policy and Programs at Brady, the Gun Violence Prevention Organization. Well, of course he thinks so, and it would be nice to think that that was the case, but I don't know if it really is. But some experts say widespread adoption of the boxes may require a dramatic cultural change akin to the revolution in seatbelt use. I would consider myself something of an expert, and I would tell you that widespread adoption of the boxes requires a different kind of dramatic cultural change, which is the problem that 99% of the members that make up the culture are not at all aware that it's any sort of a problem. There's still people out there every day. One of the things I discovered in Gun Fail is particularly as I'm focusing on the number of children who accidentally shoot themselves, that every time a child discovers a gun and accidentally shoots themselves, one, it's treated like a local phenomenon when in fact it's national. Two, every time the cops are like, well, you really need to store your guns more safely, and people have no idea. And then, of course, there's 2-year-olds can't pull a trigger, or I didn't know they could climb that high. I didn't know that the kids knew where I had hid my gun. I didn't know they knew the combination to my safe, but they do. And they tell you over and over again how to safely store these things. And, there's just no guarantee, obviously, But there's lots of steps you can take, but people don't take them because I've never heard of such a thing. A kid finding a gun and shooting themselves. Yes, every day, all over the place. And it's all over the news when it happens in your area, or sometimes when it happens in another area, if it happens in spectacular fashion. And you guys don't notice because the truth is you only care who's, I don't know, winning the Bachelor and what's the sports score. And that's why I drove my gun to the stadium to go and watch the sports score so I would know it without having to wait for the news or something like that. But anyway, yeah, there's other reasons. And the other reasons are the chief reasons for attending a sporting event. The point is people aren't paying any kind of attention. The dramatic change in culture would have to be a very different one. One in which people say, what? There's a serious problem in this country? I'll pay attention to it. They know about the school shooting one because we make such a big deal out of it. But literally every time a kid gets a hold of a gun and accidentally shoots themselves, people who are intimately involved in gun debates and whose business it is to lie about them in some cases are sometimes genuinely unaware of how often this happens. But they just say, I put it on the top shelf, so this doesn't apply to me. Anyway, that's an aside. The National Rifle Association and other gun rights advocates believe car lockbox mandates to be an onerous burden, a reflection of how the avalanche of guns is creating new sources of conflict. But that goes back to the two paragraphs ago. It's not even the extremist organizations among gun advocates. And there are ones that are even more extreme, far more extreme than the NRA. But the NRA is the chief one. They're a straight down the middle mainstream one in terms of membership and gun rights policies. And even they'll tell you, the idea of lockbox mandates, that's a Second Amendment violation. So in other words, the paragraph that said that the boxes could become a solution. Both sides encourage use of gun safes and trigger locks in the home. They sort of kind of do, but not really. And it's indicated by, the NRA certainly hasn't come around to it in car lock boxes. But when it comes straight down to mandates to use gun safes in the home, no, the NRA opposes that too. Many lock boxes are relatively cheap, simple versions that can attach to the underside of a car seat with a cable can be found for about $40. And some cities have even begun developing programs to give them away. In Houston, where more than 4,400 guns were stolen from cars last year, the police have given away roughly 700 such boxes this year, according to Houston Police Sergeant Tracy Hicks, and have plans to give away 6,300 more. Some skeptics doubt even widespread use of the boxes would make much of a dent in gun violence in a nation with more than 400 million firearms in circulation. It's like peeing in the Gulf of Mexico, said Peter Scharf, a criminologist at the Louisiana State University School of Medicine in New Orleans, which had one of the nation's highest homicide rates in 2022, and probably also urinary pollution rates, I would guess, if that's the comparison he wants to make. In Nashville, the number of guns reported stolen from cars there increased nearly tenfold over the last decade to a record 1,378 in 2022, up from 152 in 2012, according to police data. The city's rate of gun thefts from cars was the 15th highest in the country in 2020, based on FBI figures. The situation was even worse in Memphis, also in Tennessee. Tennessee's second largest city, which had the highest rate of gun thefts from cars in the nation that year, according to Everytown's analysis. It is difficult to know how many stolen guns are used in crimes, in part because only 15 states have laws requiring the reporting of lost or stolen guns. Only 15 of the 50 states even require that you report it. We don't ask enough where guns used in crimes come from, Mr. Haney said. Tennessee's Republican-dominated state legislature is considering, maybe, a pair of bills with bipartisan support that would explicitly outlaw leaving a firearm in a motor vehicle or a boat unless it is, quote, locked within the trunk, utility, or glove box or a locked container securely affixed. The only allowable punishment under the bill would be enrollment in a court-approved firearms safety course. So that's the penalty for arming criminals with a gun. It is purposely mild approach engineered to help create buy-in rather than another culture war battle, said Representative Caleb Hemmer, a Nashville area Democrat who sponsored the House bill. We're likening it to a speeding ticket, Mr. Hemmer said. We know we're in a conservative state and we're trying to convince people to be responsible gun owners, which is to say, we're in a conservative state. We can't actually require it of people. And we're not even going to try. Mr. Hemmer believes there is a relationship between the spike in the number of guns stolen from cars in Nashville and the loosening of state gun laws, including a 2021 permitless carry law. There is. And by the way, what's interesting is that I guess making it easier to just simply buy a gun legitimately didn't encourage criminals to say, why don't I avoid the possibility of criminal charges and just buy the gun myself? They're relatively cheap. Well, it's free if you steal it, and it's just going to have no impact whatsoever. But loosening restrictions means that people will say, if my gun gets stolen, it's easy enough to buy another one. I can get a replacement within the hour. So, how concerned do I have to be about spending extra money on a lockbox if I'm just going to get a speeding ticket? Well, I guess that's going to feed on itself. And it is happening. Mr. Hemmer's bill is supported by John C. Drake, the Nashville police chief, who on Tuesday wrote a letter to legislative leaders in which he mentioned the high-profile robbery and killing of a local country musician. That's the people care about down there, I guess. Kyle Yorletz, in 2019, and how that was carried out by youths using a pistol stolen from a vehicle. With gun ownership comes serious responsibility on several fronts. Not really. Including securing guns, particularly in motor vehicles, so that they do not come into the hands of thieves/violent criminals. Mr. Drake wrote, the Tennessee lockbox legislation is already generating controversy. An indication of how steadfastly gun rights advocates oppose nearly any laws that might restrict gun owners. The legislation is opposed by the NRA. Amy Hunter, an NRA spokeswoman, called Mr. Hemmer's bill feckless. I don't know why, but I guess that's supposed to be mistaken for reckless by people who don't know what feckless means, and therefore the opposition will be that much stronger. She called it feckless in a statement and said it would discourage theft victims from reporting the stolen guns to the police. And they have an argument there. This law can only be enforced if someone's gun is stolen. The victim then reports the theft and admits the gun was unsecured, at which point the theft victim is charged with a crime, she said. In Chapel Hill, Tennessee, a small town about 50 miles south of Nashville, David Henley, 51, the owner of a gun store in Tennessee, the gun store called Tennessee Armory and Outdoor Supply, had a similar view. It'd be better, he said, to increase penalties for the thieves. If you're at a house and a package is sitting on your porch and a criminal comes and steals it, it's the same thing. Who's the criminal? Okay, well, but of course, if you charge the criminal with stealing a gun and then enhance the crime for stealing an unsecured gun, well, for one thing, you might wonder whether that's even doable. But I guess here's the problem. Well, I think we should do something different and outlaw some of these types of weapons. Well, those laws don't work. If criminals obeyed laws, then that'd be a different thing. But obviously they don't because they're criminals. So why charge the criminal with an extra crime? It won't change his behavior. That's what you told me. Of course, I might believe something different. But now you've caught the guy, you can put him away for even longer. But that was the same thing with outlawing the AR-15. So why not go ahead and do that? And when you catch a criminal, you get to put him away for longer. Because that criminal might be me. Ooh, I see. Well, Representative John Gillespie, a Memphis Republican who co-sponsored Hemmer's bill, was frustrated by such arguments. I'm more than willing to increase the penalties for people stealing a gun, he said, but are we really that burdened by asking someone to properly lock up their gun in a vehicle so it can't be stolen? We are. Laws mandating that guns in cars be locked away are already on the books in some states, including California, Oregon, New York, and New Jersey. And guess what? There's a lot less gun violence there. A number of similarly themed bills are under consideration in other states, including Hawaii and Florida. And Florida, They'll get rid of it. That's too woke. A Virginia bill introduced by a Democratic senator in that state's Democratic-controlled upper chamber did not survive the 2023 legislative session, which ended in late February. Cities are also taking action. In January, the Atlanta City Council passed an ordinance seeking to create a lockbox giveaway program, but in some states they'll say no. Localities are not allowed to regulate guns in any way, shape, or form, and will invalidate that from the top down because small government and liberty. In New Orleans, Tulane University's Violence Prevention Institute has begun giving away gun boxes with biometric thumbprint locks at a local hospital. The hard thing is, when you talk to people about why they carry guns in cars, it's about safety and protection. And when you talk about lockboxes, the rebuttal is, well, I don't have quick access to my gun then, said Julia Fleckman, co-director of the Tulane Institute. In St. Louis, police have recently begun actively enforcing a 5-year-old law that mandates that guns be stored in locked containers. You remember how gun enthusiasts are always saying, well, enforce the laws already on the books. All right, we will. They'll enforce that one, and then they'll start complaining about that one when it's enforced against them. Nick Dunn, a spokesman for Mayor Tashara O. Jones. I did not realize the mayor's name in St. Louis. Okay, Tashara, do I have that right? All right, I hope so. Tashara Jones noted that judges are giving people the opportunity to have their cases dismissed if they show the court they have purchased a lockbox. Okay. Mr. Dunn said that of 192 citations written last year, roughly 3/4 of them were issued to people who did not live in St. Louis, an indication of how the political and cultural differences between cities and rural and suburban areas help fuel the problem. By the way, in other words, what's happening here is that outside agitators are coming in here and committing crimes inside St. Louis, and that's the real problem. Anyway, Houston Police Sergeant Hicks says that part of the job, his job, involves trying to get the word out to people who come in town for big sporting events. Sergeant Hicks said that it is not just out-of-town visitors who are targeted by gun thieves, although he said that they know to look for clues that suggest a gun is more likely to be in a car. If you've got a Prius with a unicorn sticker or a big F-250 with a Glock sticker, he said, referring to the popular Ford pickup truck, which one is more likely to get broken into? That's a good question. It's not really even that good of a question. It's too easy of a question, but there you have it. All right, let's see. A couple more minutes here to squeeze in one or two more stories. And which one will I go with? How about this one? Since it's been a big Trump day, I've been holding on to this one for a little while, and maybe we'll just throw it in there. Oliver Willis, I guess, noticed this one, and he's put it in his Substack style newsletter. Oliver Willis Explains. It's not actually on Substack, but fine. This from May 2nd, so going on, I guess, a little over a week ago now. The media hid Donald Trump's physical attack on a reporter for 37 days. That's interesting. Of course, Trump has just been found liable for a physical attack against E. Jean Carroll that took place several decades ago, but I don't know, seems like a pattern. He's just making a lot of physical attacks on reporters. Here's what happened. Imagine this following scenario. Here's another counterfactual for you to consider. President Joe Biden is upset after a speaking event, and a reporter asks him a question. Perturbed by the question, Biden grabs the reporter's phone that they were using to record the conversation and throws it aside. Now, imagine that such an event occurred in full view of multiple reporters, and that instead of breaking into the 24-hour news cycle to report it, the journalists sit on the story for 37 days. Well, you don't have to imagine. This actually happened, but it didn't happen with Joe Biden. It happened with Donald Trump. The decision to suppress this event says a lot about the mainstream media, and it isn't anything good. He's quite right about that. On March 27th, after his rally in Waco, Texas, multiple reports now tell us that Trump grabbed NBC reporter Vaughn Hilliard's phone after Hilliard asked him if he was, quote, irritated by the ongoing criminal investigation occurring in New York. Somehow, the story didn't surface until May 1st in a Vanity Fair report by Charlotte Klein, which I guess is herein quoted. About 10 minutes later, as Hilliard continued to ask about the investigation, Trump snapped, grabbing the reporter's 2 phones and chucking them to the side, according to a source familiar with the matter. "Get him out of here," Trump told his aides, according to a recording obtained by Vanity Fair, whose phones, I guess, were not thrown away. In a report published the next day, May 2nd, the Washington Post confirmed further details of the story. When Hilliard presses on, Trump is heard demanding, "Let's go, get him out of here, out of here, out of here," and then asking if a phone on the table is Hilliard's. "Whose is this?" Trump asked. "That one's mine too," Hilliard said, referring to another phone. In the audio, a soft thud can be heard as Trump tossed the phones to the side. The journalists were ushered away from Trump, who remained seated at the table, according to a person on the flight who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the exchange. According to the Post, the following reporters were in attendance and apparently witnessed the attack. The journalists traveling on the plane with Trump included Vaughn Hilliard of NBC, Brian Glenn of Right Side Broadcasting Network, Sophia Kai of Axios, Rob Crilly of the Daily Mail, and Evan Vucci, a photographer with the Associated Press, according to photographs taken aboard the plane and audio recordings of the gaggle. So several, and as many, if not more, right-wing outlets than normal outlets. But, NBC is who it happened to. Axios was there. AP was there. They could have reported this. They chose not to. The Daily Mail and the Right Side Broadcasting Network would obviously want to cover it up because they're pro-Trump. They didn't bother to report this physical altercation involving the former president of the United States and the current leading Republican candidate for the presidency. Even Hilliard himself gave Trump a pass. In his report on the back and forth aired on MSNBC, Hilliard didn't mention any of this. Hilliard said Donald Trump bristled at any specifics and instead called us fake news, that we were not telling the truth. That's all. That's weird. He didn't indicate that Trump grabbed his phone. He didn't play any recording of the incident, which we know exists now thanks to Vanity Fair and Post reports. Wouldn't you want to say exclusive? Actual audio recording of Trump grabbing the phones from a reporter and throwing them away? I mean, you were making the recording in the hopes of using it in your reporting, weren't you? This is profoundly strange and disturbing behavior, Oliver says. It is hard to imagine any politician in America getting such deferential treatment, and I definitely can't see the press letting someone like Biden or Hillary Clinton or John Kerry, and definitely not President Barack Obama, get away with this. But as always, there is a Trump exception. The mainstream media has a symbiotic connection to Donald Trump. They profit handily from his continued prominence as a significant political figure in America. With Biden, the book deals for soap opera-style tell-all books are few and far between. Trump and his gaggle of fools had more drama in their first week than Biden has had in over 3 years in office. With Biden, there are few clickbait headlines to be had, with absurdist stories about late-night tweets and crocodile-filled moats and plans to buy Greenland. But Trump in power means gold in the media hills, and just like when he was in office, the press engages in smoothing down his rougher edges, hiding the bizarre nature of the man and the cretins in his orbit, hoarding it for their books and other media products. As I said before, the mainstream media misses Trump, and they want him to win. The public loses out thanks to this greed and code of silence. We aren't told information that we have a right to know. The press covers it up. It's shameful and wrong, but it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. All right, he's probably right about that. And another illustrative example. Quite unfortunate, to say the very least. All right, let's see. Anything else that we can sneak in? Probably not. We're just damn close, but I don't know. We got a minute or so. Is there anything else that I'm going to skim around and see if there's just a little bit. Oh, yeah, that's a really weird story. But there's nothing we can fit in the minute or so that we've got left, except we could say this. I think, who sent this one on? Did I make note of it? I think it might have been Jeremy Freiberg who had emailed me about it when a couple of, I guess it's probably a week plus now since we were talking about it. But talking about, we paused in the middle of the reading of the article to talk about the weirdness about the way we were discussing inflation and inflationary pressures and how it was, all right, with that truck emissions bill and how Republicans were both saying that there would be this terrible burden on truckers for complying with this emissions rule and also upward pressure on their expenses, and so therefore they would pass that on to consumers in the form of higher prices of the goods that they moved to market using their trucks. But then we wondered, if those costs are covered, then why would any truckers be in danger of going out of business, since the costs are simply passed on to the rest of us? And then we also talked about, of course, the weird phenomenon of both calling the rise in prices, consumer prices, inflationary, and yet at the same time reporting that the people who were selling these goods to us were reporting record profits. And so was it really inflationary, or was it just profit taking, essentially price gouging, that was happening here? And he sent along some articles that tended to back up those claims, including this one from NBC San Diego. Grains, vegetables, dairy prices fall on the world market, yet remain high at the grocery store. So pretty much exactly what we thought was happening turns out to have been happening. And now we have some additional backup for that claim in the form of reporting from NBC. Now, also out there is, and now I'm not sure which one it was that he sent me and which one I picked up on my own, but there's also something from EPI. That's I'm trying to remember EPI, Economic Policy Institute. An article that's titled, "Corporate Profits Have Contributed Disproportionately to Inflation, and How Should Policymakers Respond?" Essentially, just saying the same. Yeah, there's a lot more profit taking and price gouging, and that's really what you should be calling it, rather than blaming it on inflation. The fact that we are willing, for whatever reason, to blame it in the media and in our discussions on inflation is just cover for more of the same happening. Anyway, I think you knew that was the case. Time for us to sign off, and time for us to get prepared to hand things off to Justice Putnam for today's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let's take a look at what he's got on tap. Only partisan commie extremists, of course, will be in favor of honest courts, and so maybe that's what's happening to us here in America. On the rest of the menu for the day, Kansas City considers becoming an LGBTQ sanctuary city. How do you like that? I know, but reminder that there are blue islands even in red America.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Check this out. In South Carolina, the House agreed to larger state worker raises. Lots of weird things happening in South Carolina these days. And a Florida law takes aim at the teachers union that defied DeSantis. No surprise there. More after all of that from around the country and around the world, as usual, an eclectic collection. We'll see you next week.